So Pope Leo has weighed into the abortion debate. I think a lot of us are just trying to unpack what he said. Those of us who are Catholic, we want to believe that there's truth in this, that he is guiding us in the right way. He's the Pope after all. But whatever which way you unpack it, for me, and I've agonised over this and whether to do this video, he doesn't make sense. It is not right. That's today on the Dr. Joe Show. So the context to all of this, why Pope Leo was being asked these questions in the first place, was because the Cardinal of Chicago was going to give a Lifetime Achievement Award for the enhancement and preservation of human dignity to Democrat Senator Dick Durbin. Now, Dick Durbin is a Democrat. He's a pro-abortion Democrat. He tries to weasel his way out of it, like Biden does, like a lot of pro-abortion people do, by saying, I personally wouldn't have an abortion. In fact, I dissuade people around me not to have abortions, but I believe that other people should be able to have abortions. I support a woman's right to choose. Now, I've talked about this on the show. If you've been following me for a while, you know the arguments here. If something is a grave injustice and you personally would not do it, so let's talk about domestic violence, rapes, slavery, any of those kinds of gravely evil things that you wouldn't do personally because you know them to be evil, then it doesn't make it okay to turn a blind eye and say that other people can do it. If something's wrong, it's wrong. It should be wrong for everybody. Now, the interesting thing about Durbin is he didn't start his political career this way. In fact, in the 1980s, when he was running for the Senate, he was actually up against a pro-abortion Republican, and Dick Durbin was seen as the pro-life candidate. In fact, he even gave a speech at the March for Life in Chicago in the 1980s. He was the pro-life candidate at the time. But very quickly, once he was in that place, once he was in the Senate, he realised that his political career would not advance unless he was on the side of abortion. And so, vote after vote after vote, he sided with the abortionists. And in fact, when Roe v. Wade was about to be overturned, when there was a Supreme Court decision, he was even running petitions telling people, tell me your Roe v. Wade story. Tell me why abortion up to birth has been so important for you. He was gathering stories for the abortion industry and using his platform to do this. So this is someone that started off good, but through the process of politics to climb up the greasy pole, to gain power, he's actually taken on the side of the devil. He's taken on abortion, and he's now become its mouthpiece. And so for the Cardinal to be giving him a Lifetime Achievement Award for the preservation of human dignity, when there's nothing more annihilating to human dignity than abortion. It literally kills innocent human beings. It just beggars belief. It blows the mind. And in fact, he was getting called out. There were lots of people, lots of bishops even calling out the intention to give Dick Durbin this award. And when the Pope was asked about it, this controversy had been brewing for some time. Let's take a look at what Pope Leo said.
Just wanted to ask one thing that has become a bit of a divisive subject in the US right now, with Cardinal Cupich giving an award to Senator Durbin. Some people of faith are having a hard time with understanding this because he is he's for legalized abortion. How would you help people of faith right now decipher that, feel about that, and how do you feel about that?
I'm not terribly familiar with the particular case. I think that it's very important to look at the overall work that a senator has done during, if I'm not mistaken, 40 years of service in the United States Senate. I understand the difficulty and the tensions, but I think as I myself have spoken in the past, it's important to look at many issues that are related to what is the teaching of the church.
So I'm going to stop it there. He does go on, but I just want to pick this out and unpack it for you guys line by line. So he says, I'm not terribly familiar with the particular case, but I think it is important to look at the overall work that a senator has done during, I think, 40 years of service in the United States Senate. So even before we get any further, and this isn't a criticism about Pope Leo with this, but I think it's just something that I want to correct in the way that people see public service, because politicians like Dick Durbin, Pope Leo's giving it credence, but politicians of every variety, Liberal or Labor, whatever, Democrat, Republican, they all talk about this noble idea of public service. And, maybe in the days of Abraham Lincoln and Ronald Reagan and others, Robert Menzies, this was something, like people went into politics genuinely to serve the public. But I don't see it. What I see is this. I see people that in their university days were really involved in university politics. They were working their way up either the Liberal Party or the Labor Party factions. They get their first jobs as a staffer for a politician. They then get pre-selected themselves. They then serve in the parliament, serve in inverted commas, and we're meant to believe that these people are noble. In fact, they're given the title, the Honourable, Anthony Albanese. Like they're given, there's this notion here that this is 40 years of service that Dick Durbin has done for the community. No. This is 40 years that Dick Durbin has done for himself. These politicians, they talk a big game about service and about honour and integrity, but if anyone that's been close to politics, as I have, can see it a mile away that these aren't people who are in it for the people. They are people who are in it for themselves. This is about power. This is about keeping power. This is about doing whatever it takes to keep that power. We see that, emblematically in the career of Dick Durbin, in that he started off pro-life because it helped. He got the pro-life vote. But once he was in there, he completely threw the unborn babies under the bus. And he knew that to rise in the Democrats, and he's had a very successful career, he knew that he had to be on the side of abortion and of Planned Parenthood, which is one of the Democrats' biggest donors. And I think the point needs to be made that even if it was service, even if we take Pope Leo at his word and we take these politicians at their word that they're serving the community, we shouldn't accept the kind of service that Dick Durbin has done. He's served in a way that is monstrously evil. He's advanced the killing of the most innocent human beings in the country, these little defenseless, voiceless babies. He's been part of an industry that seeks to annihilate them and to give them no human rights. So if this is service, it's service in the name of evil, and it shouldn't be awarded. And the other thing that I find that I just did want to say here is, like, Pope Leo says, I'm not terribly familiar with the particular case, but he knows that Dick Durbin's been in there for 40 years. So he has some level of specificity around this man and around his career. And so he obviously would be aware that Dick Durbin is one of the most pro-abortion people in the country, that he is part of a party that is aggressively pro-abortion. And yet he goes on to say what he says next. Let's watch.
Someone who says I'm against abortion but says I'm in favor of the death penalty is not really pro-life. So someone who says that I'm against abortion but I'm in agreement with the inhuman treatment of immigrants who are in the United States, I don't know if that's pro-life.
So the crazy thing about this is when he says, I'm against abortion, but I'm in favour of the death penalty, is not really pro-life. Or someone who says, I'm against abortion, but I'm in favour of the inhuman treatment of immigrants in the United States, I don't know if that's pro-life. This is the bit that went viral. And the crazy thing about it, it's just literally straight from the pro-abortion playbook. Like, you guys would know this. Almost every video that I post or that you might write, when you write a comment on this issue, people will say to you, but you're not really pro-life, are you? Because, like, how many babies have you fostered? How many have you adopted? Pro-life people, they say they're just pro-birth. They're not actually pro-life. And that is the key pro-abortion trolling point that they use to just diminish and undermine everything that we say. What the Catholic Church actually teaches is that abortion is intrinsically evil because it kills a human being. That's what the Church says. It says that the intentional killing of an unborn human being in the womb is intrinsically evil. It doesn't teach that about the death penalty or about immigration. For 2,000 years, the Catholic Church actually had a position on the death penalty that it was allowed. They didn't outlaw it. And in fact, as commentators like Matt Walsh point out, in the Old Testament, God actually prescribes the death penalty. He says that human beings can and should use it for a system of justice. The 2,000-year position of the Catholic Church on the death penalty was changed in August 2018 by Pope Francis. He announced that he was formally changing the Catholic Church's teaching on the death penalty, calling the practice an attack on the inviolability and dignity of the person, adding that it is inadmissible in all cases. But even he didn't say that it's intrinsically evil. which is what the church has said for over 2,000 years on abortion. Even if we were to accept that Pope Francis's diktat in 2018 is correct, even though it overrides 2,000 years of tradition, even if we accepted that it is correct, he himself doesn't say that they're morally equivalent, the death penalty and abortion, that the death penalty is an intrinsic evil. And I mean, even just you and I, we can work this out ourselves. If they're not morally equivalent, the death penalty involves a system of justice, a system of order that we've all agreed upon in a democratic society, that someone who takes innocent life, a murderer, someone who actually kills innocent human beings, that they would face the death penalty as the ultimate consequence for what they've done. After a system of trial, they've been found guilty. This is the consequence. You know, I'm not saying that I'm for the death penalty, but I'm saying I understand it. This is what the basis for it is. But abortion isn't that. This is without trial, without any adjudication, without any attempt for debate or voice or any of it. These little babies are literally voiceless, and their innocent life gets taken. That's what abortion is. And the difference is just so clear when you compare them. So for Pope Leo to say, they're equivalent, to talk about moral equivalency, it just blows my mind. It beggars belief because it just isn't true. But of course, in Pope Leo saying this, we get the headlines predictably from the mainstream media celebrating the fact that Pope Leo, the Pope, has taken the position that they do, which is that you're not really pro-life, you just force birth. And the next thing he says is even more egregious. He says, someone who says, I'm against abortion, but I'm in favour of the inhumane treatment of immigrants in the United States, I don't know if that's pro-life. So Pope Leo appears to be directing this at the pro-life community, who is up in arms about the fact that Dick Durbin's receiving an award because of his achievements in the space of immigration. Pope Leo appears to be insinuating that the pro-life community is for the inhumane treatment of immigrants. Now, I don't know where he's getting this from, because I think this is an outrageous thing to say about pro-lifers, that they support the inhumane treatment of immigrants. I don't know anybody who supports the inhumane treatment of immigrants. I think what he's trying to get to here is the issue of illegal immigration. Note, he doesn't say that, but America, like most Western democracies, have an issue with illegal immigration. And so what Pope Leo is perhaps saying, and he doesn't say it clearly, so we have to read between the lines, I think what he's saying is that when the American government, rounds up illegal immigrants and deports them, that's the inhumane treatment of immigrants. I think that's what he's trying to say here. But again, just like this, supposed moral equivalence that he uses for the death penalty, here he says, rounding up and deporting illegal immigrants is inhumane, and therefore you're not really pro-life if you support a country enforcing its borders. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. It's not the same thing. And I shouldn't have to tell the Pope this. We shouldn't have to tell the Pope this. But on the one hand, you've got 60 million little babies who have been murdered by abortion in the US over the last 50 years. And on the other hand, you have people who have entered the country illegally, illegal immigrants who are now getting deported because they've broken American law. And Pope Leo says they're essentially the same thing. You can't be pro-life unless you support these guys too. But what do you do, Pope Leo? What would be your response if people just entered Vatican City, people entered the Sistine Chapel and wanted to squat there overnight? What would be your response? The thing about immigration, and you guys, some of you may know this, but I spent most of my academic career on this issue, researching on the issue of immigration. The thing about it is there has to be a system. Like, you either support open borders, which is like anybody can go anywhere, or you don't. And if you support having a border, then you have to enforce that border. Like that has to mean something. And I know Pope Leo, when it came down to it, would support that if people tried to enter Vatican City. It's not like they house all of the refugees in the world, right? All of the people that want to go there get to stay there. Like that's not the policy of Vatican City. And if 11 million illegal immigrants, and we're told it's 11 million, but it probably is more. But if 11 million illegal immigrants who currently go into the US, if they entered Vatican City, what would Pope Leo do? He would deport them. I mean, these are complex questions. The question of immigration is a difficult question. It's a question that governments all around the world are grappling with at the moment. But what's not difficult? It's abortion. Abortion isn't a complex issue. It's not a difficult question. Because if you support abortion, you support killing an innocent human being, and that's just always wrong. That's why the church teaches it's intrinsically evil. And you can't say that about deporting illegal immigrants. You can't say that because it's just not the same thing. That's a policy decision that a government takes to enforce its border. And in fact, enforcing a border is a good thing. It's something that countries should do. It's how you have a nation, you know. Like you wouldn't just let anybody else into your house. Why do we let everybody into our country? Like there has to be an orderly system of immigration. There has to be a border. And I think what Pope Leo's insinuating here is that the decision of the Trump administration to control the border, to enforce the border, that's somehow inhumane.
So they're very complex issues. I don't know if anyone has all the truth on them, but I would ask first and foremost that there be greater respect for one another and that we search together both as human beings, in that case as American citizens or citizens of the state of Illinois, as well as Catholics, to say we need to, really look closely at all of these ethical issues and to find the way forward as church. Church teaching on each one of those issues is very clear. Thank you very much.
So I think the bit that really gets me about this is when he says, I don't think any of us have all of the truth on these issues. All of the truth. I mean, on abortion, we unequivocally have all of the truth. What other truth is there? Like we maintain the position that even in the case of rape or incest or, a child with anencephaly who's going to die, we say that killing them, intentionally killing the child, even in these really difficult circumstances, it's always a grave moral wrong. It's always intrinsically evil. So for him to say we don't have all of the truth, like, to be honest, for me, this whole thing from Pope Leo is it really upset me because here are we on the front lines, like actually in the culture war, fighting for this issue, fighting for these babies in a culture that is so hostile to them, in a system where, Planned Parenthood is donating millions of dollars to the Democratic Party. In Australia, Marie Stopes, is doing the same thing to Labor and the Greens and possibly the Libs. Like, we just don't know. But we know that the abortion industry has its tentacles all around the world. We know how gross it is. We know how it targets babies with disabilities. It targets baby girls in certain ethnic communities. We know that Planned Parenthood has more clinics in black neighbourhoods than in other neighbourhoods. Like, we know that the founders, Margaret Sanger and Marie Stopes, were monstrously evil. They wanted to create, a thoroughbred race that was like essentially Aryan, right? The Aryan race that the Nazis wanted. Like that's what this industry is about. And here is the leader of the Catholic Church just throwing all of us under the bus by saying there's some kind of moral equivalence with the death penalty and with immigration. There just isn't. And to hear him say this, it's so upsetting. It is so upsetting because it just gives license to all of those people who already criticize us. If the leader of the church is saying this. I mean, you guys know the cost of this, like the investigation after investigation, the hit piece after hit piece, the being called a bully and a liar. You would at least think that the Pope has your back. And unfortunately, I mean, I just hope that this is something that gets corrected over time, that he sort of says, this was an impromptu press conference, caught me off guard. I hope that he comes back to this because, even Pope Francis, who a lot of people criticized, he compared abortion to the case of someone taking out a hitman. Like he was really clear that it was wrong. He never equivocated on it. He continued the tradition of Pope Benedict and Pope John Paul II and the 2,000 years prior where the church had always had a really clear position on abortion. And yet in this word salad from the Pope, we get something really quite different and quite disappointing. I think the last thing I want to say is this. It feels to me like it's a bit like when Dennis Hood paired, this is now getting into the weeds, but I just stay with me, guys. And if you've stayed with me on the video this long, surely you can stay with me for this last bit. Do you remember when the South Australian Parliament last year had a debate on the live births bill and we lost by one vote? And the reason we lost in the upper house is because Dennis Hood chose to pair out. He's a pro-life or supposedly a pro-life MP, and he chose to obey a parliamentary convention around pairing over the issue at hand, which was stopping babies in the third trimester from being injected with poison. And I've done video after video explaining that in my mind, what this showed was that Dennis Hood and all the people who defended him, including some pro-life groups, they don't see babies in the womb the same as they do babies outside the womb. Because if that had been a debate about Dennis Hood's own children or born children, anyone's children who are born and in a room, and there'd been 45 healthy little babies who were injected with poison into their hearts, and, you know, we could see them, we could see this injection, and we could see these little babies go from alive to dead through excruciating agony. No one would have said that Dennis Hood should have paired, that he should have obeyed a parliamentary convention. And what I said at the time, and what I'm telling you guys, is it showed really that we didn't see babies in the womb the same way as we see babies outside of the womb, even people in the pro-life community. And here we have the Pope Leo, who says, well, you know, you've got to look at his 40 years of service. You've got to look at his lifetime of achievement. You've got to look at what he's done in immigration versus what he's done on the abortion issue. You can't really be pro-life unless you're for all of those things. I guess what it feels to me is that this is Pope Leo not seeing abortion for what it really is. Because if Dick Durbin was, I don't know, let's say he'd done all of this wonderful work in Pope Leo's mind on the issue of immigration, but he'd been a member of the Nazi Party, or he'd, you know, sympathised with Nazi views, I don't think anybody would be giving him a Lifetime Achievement Award, because we just all know that Nazism is evil. We just know that. It's a grave wrong. It annihilated 6 million Jews. It's just a really dangerous, evil, bad ideology. It's vile. And, you know, yet Dick Durbin is not a member of the Nazi Party, but he supports abortion. And it just exposes that we don't see abortion in the same way. And even in the unlikely scenario that there's someone sick enough out there who wants to give Dick Durbin an award, despite his membership of the Nazi Party or his support for their views at some point in his past, you know, if a journalist asked Pope Leo that question, should he receive that award? Pope Leo wouldn't give this answer, would he? He wouldn't give that answer. He would say no. He just would. And so his answer would be no, but let's unpack why his answer would be no. Well, it would be no around the Nazis because everybody agrees, the secular world agrees that Nazism is bad, that this is evil. And so we'd all agree with that. But then, you know, when we see his answer on this question of abortion and this award to Dick Durbin, I don't know why he equivocates, but it feels like he does because the secular world supports abortion. Because abortion is healthcare, abortion is pro-women. It feels like that's where he's getting his cues from. And, you know, what I liked about Pope John Paul II and Pope Benedict and Mother Teresa, you know, all of these, you know, public figures from the church, they never bowed to the secular world. In fact, they took their cues from the faith, from the teaching and the tradition of 2,000 years. And Mother Teresa, when she was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for all of the work that she did with the poor, she got up in front of that audience and she gave a speech about abortion. She didn't talk about her work with the poor. She said that the biggest evil that happens in the world today and there is when a mother kills her own child, and that there'll be no peace unless we stop abortion. And she did the same thing when she was invited to speak in front of President Clinton and Hillary Clinton at the US National Prayer Breakfast. You know, they were all stunned. She received a standing ovation from everybody other than the Clintons. But that's because she told that audience that there's nothing more evil than abortion. So, you know, we don't see that equivocation from some of these great historical figures in our church, even just from recent memory. So all of this to say, you know, this isn't about bashing the Catholic Church. This isn't about leaving the Catholic Church. This is about seeing this as a period in time where we as the laity need to call the church to the truth of its tradition, and to stand up for these babies and to stand up for the fact that abortion is always intrinsically evil, standing by a church teaching of over 2,000 years. And, you know, in New South Wales and in South Australia, we have 2 pro-life campaigns afoot, one for Sarah Games' bill to protect babies after 23 weeks, one in New South Wales for John Ruddock's bill to protect little baby girls from being killed. So in each of those places, I need you guys to be the hands and feet for these babies, to be writing to the politicians, to be turning up to the rally in Sydney on October 22. No matter where you are in the country, I encourage you to attend because we have to stand up for these babies. It's all we can do. It's all that's asked for us. You know, I often agonise over the fact that who knows what's going to happen in the future, but I just remind myself that I just have to do the work and the outcome is not my responsibility. So let's work hard, and thank you for watching. That's today on The Dr. Jo Show.